Hello, and welcome to Creators in Conversation, Tracing Figures. I'm Mulaney Barnett, visual artist and the founder of the Black Artists and Designers Guild. This weekend, we launched Obsidian House, our virtual concept house for the modern, multi-generational Black family of 2025. The project showcases 23 badge members, a distinguished international group of Black creators, including fine artists, architects, and interior designers. Each space in this home is designed to honor the cultural traditions of the global Black diaspora. This edition of our series, Creators and Conversations, explores the lives and work of the legends in the field of fine art who have shaped and inspired our community. For Tracing Figures, we invited a leading artist and an art historian to offer their reflections on the impact of the visual arts of the Black diaspora on their lives and work. I'm thrilled to welcome our moderator, visual artist, furniture designer, longtime advocate for Black people in the arts, Cheryl R. Riley. Cheryl is also one of the contributors to the Obsidian House. Hey, Cheryl, it's so good to see you, and thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for all of your great work. Okay, everyone's. Hello there.
Hi,
Hey,
hello.
Hi, Zoe. Hello, AJ. So nice to
hi.
see you both.
Yeah, you too.
Zoe, I wanted to just do a quick little introduction of both of you. I'm Cheryl Riley. Cheryl R. Riley, I prefer, and I'm an artist, a designer, and an art advisor. My focus is artists of the Black African diaspora, and a proud member of BADG. Zoe, I know you are a visual artist and you create figure drawings, collages, installations, and animations. You use the nude body of the Black female and you depict your subjects in relationship with their world by combining images of culturally loaded objects and landscapes with figure drawings. I know you have an MFA from the University of Texas at Austin. So we are really happy to have you here on this talk today.
Wow.
And AJ Girard is an arts professional and cultural strategist. Antoine is very passionate about art and social change. Your professional and scholarly interests include Black visual culture and inclusive engagement strategies. You have a BA in art history from Howard University, and you began your work at the Broad and the California African American Museum. Most recently, you worked at the famed Underground Museum as well, that was founded by Noah Davis.
Yeah.
I'm so happy to be here with you both. Have a few questions for you, and then I'd just like you to feel comfortable just speaking out, and we'll have some questions maybe also from the audience. Um, so, Zoe, what does Black womanhood mean to you?
Wow. That's a loaded question. I would say that Black womanhood means to me all that the women in my family are. I come from a matriarchal family, and actually the eldest in the family is my aunt, who is now 96 years old. She is a year older than my grandmother was when she passed away. So the matriarch is embodied in how I understand myself and how I see myself.
That is really a beautiful lineage to have. One of the things I love so much about your females when I first encountered them is that they are real bodies. Can you talk to me a little bit about the reason for portraying the real versus the ideal and your relationships with the models when you conceive and create your works?
Oh, yeah. Oh my gosh. I thank you so much for this question. I have I started out drawing, like everyone that makes figure drawings, models that came to my classes, and they did not look like me. They did not look like me. And so um, all the women in my family are larger women. And I think that it was just important for me to portray women's bodies that were reflective of my own and reflective of my family, because that was a very real figure. It was a believable body that I could get behind, I could project myself into and onto, and understand. I could relate to
Mhm.
that body. And so it just made a lot of sense for me to do that. And I specifically look for people in the world to draw that reflect who the women that I'm looking at.
That's very interesting. That's very interesting. And I was not surprised that it is from a personal standpoint that you're drawing. How does the time you spend drawing or painting the model affect the results of your painting? And is there a relationship with a specific model in your life now?
Yeah. So I have this really long process that I go through when inviting people into the studio to model for me, to participate. And I meet them at least 2 to 3 times before we even get into the studio and get to work, because it really is about safety. It's about their safety. It's about my safety. It's about our comfort. It's about consent, really. And what I try to practice in my studio, because I've worked with people, is forms of radical consent. So I might have an idea for a series. And I have a great example. A young person named Lena who participated in a figure drawing session at an institution or organization here in Baltimore. And and she started doing these yoga poses, and she pulled out this yoga pose where her knees were by her ears and her pelvis was out in full view of everyone. And I was so surprised because I hadn't seen a pose like that ever that anyone had taken. And 2 years later, I ended up contacting her through a mutual friend, and I asked her if she would pose for me, and I explained to her why. And I had this idea about strapping these model train houses to a figure. And I talked with her about that. And she was uncomfortable about some ways that I wanted to kind of connect those houses to her, but more comfortable with other ways that I would do that. And she ended up posing for all of the drawings in the Suburban Squatters series. And I was really excited about that. And so I mentioned that specific story because she actually shifted the way that I moved through that series. I would have done some other things had it not been for her input. And I actually needed her input because I actually think that it made the work stronger.
That's amazing. Yeah,
Yeah.
the relationship between the model and the artist.
Yeah.
It's storied in history, in art history.
Yeah.
Um, I noticed these other objects. Talk to us about that. The shoes and the nature, the plants. What's going on? Tell us about that
So,
relationship with the female and the Black female body.
yeah, I have a really, I, I always think that I have a really kind of strange sense of humor that actually doesn't come out unless I'm in my studio. And I have a lot of props that are hanging around my studio. So, I've got capes and wigs and train houses and galoshes and flip-flops and oxfords and all of those things. And I think about those objects next to a particular kind of body because it helps narrate, right? It tells something, it says something. And it could be based in truth, it could be an embellished, it could be fictions. I mean, really, I think I'm dealing with a lot of fictions that are anchored in some kind of truth, right, about my own family. But when I attach a house to someone, it's because it reminds me of what suburbia is. It reminds me of sometimes my grandmother's house. It makes me think about who I am as a Black suburbanite, right? When I put galoshes on a figure, like rain shoes. I think about traipsing through the mud and what it means to walk, like my grandmother walked through the rain and all sorts of weather just to go to her job to be a domestic worker. You know, I think about things like that. I think about my cousins who, you know, sort of have a different kind of relationship to land and having to walk around and walk through and to get to the places that they need to go. And so those objects become symbolic. It's about the figure's relationship to this prop or this object. And when I'm using masks, for instance, I'm really thinking about the history of that mask, where it came from, what it means for me as someone that did not know what a bembe mask looked like, or I didn't understood the reference to it or how it was used until I started drawing them, right? And so I had to move from being a tourist within my own culture, right, to aspects of my own culture into someone that was knowledgeable about this object, right? And I had to really rethink my own relationship to art historical references that use those images, right? I always say, can't use the P word because I don't want to bring him into this conversation, but I think that these are kind of interesting things, right? And so, and for instance, in this piece, this is called Hopefully Looking for Life. And, you know, these masks are jumping up towards this woman's body. It's a body that makes me think about my grandmother's body. My grandmother was a large woman. She had large breasts. She was beautiful. She was substantial. She was a rock. She was concrete. She was all of those things. And this is her family. This is all of us. This is all the community that's all going towards her for sustenance, for revelation, for comfort, for all of these ways that I think about what my grandmother stood for and who she was. Yeah.
That's amazing. That's really great to hear that. Let's see the other piece with the nature, with the plants that are that you had included also.
Yeah. So in those two pieces, while I pulled them up, the one on the left with the birds
Mm-hmm.
is called Her Yet Unwoven Garment. And the one on the right is Not Meant for the Homebred, Not Meant for the Homebred. And actually all the titles in this series called the Compromise series are based, thanks, are based in, are come from Frederick Douglass's 4th of July speech. They're actually all lines from there. I read that speech every year, and we know that he gave it on July the 5th. But when I read this speech, it just makes me think about my grandmother, because there's the audacity, right? The audacity to live, the audacity to critique, the audacity to kind of live on your own terms. And I think about her and why she made the decisions that she did. My grandmother decided, and her husband, my grandfather, decided to start purchasing property in the panhandle of Florida, and in the 40s, in the early 40s, at a time when there weren't a lot of Black folks doing that. And I just found that really compelling. Just my grandmother had a 3rd grade education, but she knew that a way to have stability and security was through land. And so I'm thinking about her property when I make these drawings and collages. I think
That's
about the
beautiful.
density of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, the density of them.
And how they were attached to nature in more ways
Yeah,
than we are now.
exactly.
This leads me to you, AJ. I, as a curator and an arts professional from the other side of it, what are you looking at when you're reaching out to put together either a group show or a one-person show? What is it that sparks you to choose the subject matter or the artist, and even the space in which you choose to display the works?
I mean, that right there, I would, I didn't say anything because I was so like wrapped into what you were saying. I live for these type of conversations. Black art sustains me. And I think really listening to artists, like where they are as they're practicing, you know, what they're trying to connect to, what they're trying to walk away from, like all these things. I think my job is to facilitate that conversation and to add a wider spectrum to make sure that more audiences are able to pick up what, you know, these artists are putting down, I guess, in a sense. That was everything. I was really, I was like in the palm of your hands for that one.
What artists have been inspiring you lately?
I have a slide. If I can go to a slide, I think my first slide actually points to that. David Hammonds is someone who I'm still unpacking. Yeah, we definitely gotta. I was like, you know, I gotta bring my nuance and my energy to this conversation, but I am practicing the skill set of listening. So like Zoe, you had me all the way in, but David Hammonds is an artist for me that really does open up accessibility through the work. And what I mean by that is like specifically to my community, Black, brown, othered, young, poor, whatever you want to, whatever works for people's imagination of that. But when I encountered this work, especially in my research of like, I think I was looking for Soul of a Nation, trying to unpack all of those artists, but make sure that this wasn't, even though it was a group show of artists of color, I didn't want every story to just sound like opposition, struggle, those type of things. I was looking for a different type of language, and David Hammonds was the one that actually offended me the most, because at that point I thought art looked like Barkley Hendricks, and that's what I wanted. I wanted really high, beautiful images of people that look like me. And David returned to me with the chicken grease and brown paper bag and afro hair, and I was like, no. But I sat with my distaste. I kind of was like, why are you rejecting this? And I think in the idea of understanding that like his materiality was pointing to me, it was actually including me in the conversation. And it meant the thing that I even was trying to discard, the part of me that I didn't want to have show up when I go into these art spaces. I immediately felt like this person was worth more exploration. And David has made me laugh in so many ways because I never get the answer I'm looking for. I'm just like, he changes it, you know, he's the trickster. That's kind of how I look at him in the art world, as someone who is really like, if you think there was a finish line, you're fooled, you know, keep working.
Yeah. He is very profound and much deeper than the first visuals of his work are. And I find everything I've ever seen of his, the more I think about it, the more I see in it. So I also wanted to ask you both, like, why do we need galleries or museums or spaces like that? We're now in this, we're moving into the world that we're in now. Tell me what is the advantage of having that type of space, virtual versus virtual spaces, and even museums, as opposed to in a gallery space?
Ooh.
Wow.
Yeah, it's an early morning ball drop right there. Do you want to go, Zoe? I mean, I have feelings, but you
know, that's a really tricky question. My professional life has been mediated through galleries until about 2016, when I made the decision to leave a gallery. And I think it ended up being the best decision that I could make. However, I will say that there are benefits to having representation. There are benefits to actually working with museums. And one of that is about access. It's about, there's something about the kind of confirmation, right? We're already working within systems that we're trying to dismantle anyway. Mm-hmm. But in the road to dismantling those systems, like fully, we're still participating in some of them, right? And the museum is a part of that ecosystem. And that if I'm working with a museum or a gallery that is on the side of solidarity, they're going to have spaces for me to expand in ways that are unusual. They will challenge me. They will do all of these things. And so I think that for me, the best kind of gallery and also museum that I can work with is one that really understands and sees me and hears the things. And that's based on the things that I'm producing, right? And so I think that there is a need for that kind of space. And often there are artists that cannot make work unless they have the spaces that are available at these institutions and organizations, right?
Yeah.
That's what that is.
So, and Antoine, yeah, I also wanted to trigger you with that too. And I realize also like your relationship, what made me think about is your relationship with the Underground Museum, a museum started by an artist. And talk to me a little bit about that journey and how that has influenced your being a curator and a person putting together shows of artists.
Absolutely. And I also just want to say I'm from a generation where like Black Twitter immediate response is a thing. So like the chat part of this conversation is really where it's at. Just want to
It's
throw
on fire.
that out there. I hope everybody's looking at the chat because it's where you get the exact reaction. But no, I mean, yeah, in all honor to the figures that have come before me, both, you know, still with us and not, like Noah Davis is definitely someone who I attribute lighting my path. You know, I think that the way that he saw him and his wife, Karan Davis, and the whole Davis family saw art, and that's like Khalil Joseph, Anya, like the entire family, they, I think were a group of Black people who really understood like art. And, you know, Noah was a young painter, and from everything that, and I mean, I'm literally sitting at the feet of every member of his family looking to get his narrative, because when I was I mean, my life was led to this moment, this place. My first museum job was right across the street from the museum that was showing Noah's, like a preview of nonfiction, which was probably the biggest, like, if we want to say that, FU to the art world. He essentially took, you know, Duchamp, Dan Flavin, like all these white male painters and artists, he made variants of that work because he couldn't get any sponsorship for his space. No one believed what he was doing. So he said, I'm going to make something that looks like what's accepted, put it in my space, drive accessibility forward, make people understand that location is everything. And people thought that this man had these works. And he put that up against where I was working, you know, burning the midnight. Well, people at that point, just for kind of bio on me, jokingly were calling me like the Harriet Tubman of fine art, because the Broad at that time was super inaccessible to get into. I mean, you were standing outside for hours to look at a billionaire's private collection, and across the way was this Black man basically saying like, I can do it too. And after whatever happened to my life, so I guess to answer your first question, I feel like museums, institutions, galleries, they are locations only. So yes, the answer is triggered for sure for me, because I found that like community for me is people, and it does not work if you're only allowing a percentage of the people to understand this conversation. So I was always the kid that was trying to make accessibility by any means necessary, however I found it to be. And oftentimes I got in trouble for that. You know, it was definitely against the law of the art world, and I didn't know that. So coming to a space like the Underground Museum, where everything about it is cultivated for these radical dreams, right? I do think institutions is still important, because I do think that there are places that we need to gather to have these conversations. But I do think in some type of like David and Goliath fashion, I think there are a lot of things that need to be broken, like spoken out against. And does that help?
And some museums have been started by artists as well, so that there clearly was that need. We have a good question here from one of our viewers. What pivots have you made as a result of the pandemic that you will continue post-pandemic, and what's been the best that you've learned or has changed you that you will maintain? And so I thought that was a very interesting question, because we are in this very life-changing time right now.
Yeah, you know, that's a great question. I shifted, you know, for the first about 6 months of the pandemic, and the just frankly the racial pandemic, which has been an ongoing pandemic, you know, for you know, decades. I stopped. I had to stop working in my studio, and I actually started working with coalitions. I wanted to build with people, and I actually needed to do that. And by the end of the summer, I truly felt ready to get back into my studio because of all the work. And that work was done out of love, not out of frustration or anger, but really out of love for Black folks, for myself, for my brother, for my uncles and cousins, etc. So you know, the pandemic, the downtime, has given me space to sit with myself and sit in my ideas and really put my politic into practice
Mhm.
in a lot of different ways. But I wanted to just circle back to something that AJ was saying, based on your last question, Cheryl. And I was really thinking about the artists that have inspired me, and really they inspired me because of their relationships to the institutions like museums and galleries. And I don't have images of these artists' work. I have images of other work, but I wanted to say it's Joyce Scott, was actually the first Black artist that I learned about. And that was because of the late Ed Love asked me if I knew who she was. And I said, no, I don't. I mean, I'm in this art history class and we're looking at garners, for God's sake, you know? And he says, you need to know who she is, like you get up in the morning and realize you're breathing. And I thought that was dope. And so when I met her, when I moved to Baltimore and I met her, I was drop jawed, and she picked on me because I was starstruck. She knew I was starstruck, and I'm still every time I see her, I'm still like, So, but I was gonna say that, you know, her relationship to her own practice and community, because one of the questions I've always asked her is like, why did you stay in Baltimore? Like, why did you stay in the neighborhood where you live? You know, she got a MacArthur Genius. Why are you still here? And she said, because my community is the reason why I'm here. It's the reason why I make the work. And that's a politic that she's put into practice. You know, I'm looking at the late Robert Colescott because of the satirical ways that he had imagined or managed expectations of social commentary through the act of painting, through this tradition that the art world of the time really valued. And he said, well, I've got this content that's really important, so I'm just going to talk about it. You know, and the fact that he was the first Black American in the Venice Biennale to represent us. And, you know, and Simone Lee is going to be representing us in the Biennale. And this is exciting for me. It was an exciting time when I was just coming into my artist self. And someone like Howardina Pindell, who I'm just like, like, you know, skies open, and the broadness and the complexity of the media, the structure, and how she worked with her various identities and positionalities as a Black woman and as an artist with a long career in academia. And as an academic myself, I look to her. Matter of fact, if she's gonna see this
herself through that whole time,
you know, right? I'm like, I'm gonna send her an email this week just because I said that. So
her writing is a lot. It's good.
Right?
Yeah.
She's much more rounded than people would think.
They realize.
And Antoine, you know, I was thinking about you, and we talked about scholars as well, and the people who have inspired you, who are scholars. And I know you brought up Thelma Golden was one. Talk to me a little bit about what influenced these big thinkers, and who were also on the ground at the same time, have affected your approach to being a curator.
I mean, definitely, Thelma is someone who I always sort of do this idea of like lighting the path, because it just feels so dark and gloomy, because I'm not someone who had parents who took me to the museum. As much as my reputation in my like contemporary community looks like I live in museums and galleries and spaces. If you follow me on social, it's like I'm always at an art space. That is because I made a strong choice in the later part of my adult life to be happy. So I did that. But I think that, yeah, when I really started this, it was a kid in Texas reading books. And, you know, you can't read a Black art book without Thelma Golden forwarding something. And so I just constantly was like, who is this? Who is this? And then I did my research. I've never even been to the Studio Museum. I just, for the first time, going to New York City to go help the Davis family, put up the Noah Davis retrospective with the Zwerner. drove past the Studio Museum and was like jarred because like I was like, you know, I went to Howard, so like I'm kind of used to the juxtaposition of like neighborhood, and I mean like neighborhood, real life, and Black excellent, whatever you want to, that whole conversation like being one. But I was like, whoa, is this where like all of the freestyle and all of this is like right here in the same
That
time?
little
I'm
spot,
like,
that little
right
place.
next to this, and it made me really appreciate, because the Underground Museum is the same way. Like there's no signage, there's no way to identify it. So many guests walk by and
Right.
were like, I've stopped so many people from going to the Jamaican restaurant and be like, have you been to a museum? And they don't even want to walk in the door because they're like, what is this kid asking me to do? So yeah, I mean, to piggyback off of that, my heroes look like Noah Davis, Thelma Golden, and Kelly Jones. I think I saw Tracy in here too. Like my heroes are people who are of the neighborhood now. Like when I went up to North California, like she let me come, you know, be in the backyard, fed me. Like this isn't something that I'm like getting all of my stuff out of books. Like I'm in a real life place. Lauren Halsey is my same age, and I tell her all the time she's my hero, because for a long time in art history and art studies, like when I was giving these tours in front of Basquiat or whatever, or even Roy de Carava, people would tell me like, is that really in the work? Is this type of freedom thinking really in the work? And so I was really inspired by Lauren Halsey's Some of Everything, because inside of her work is my end to bring other Black bodies from what, you know, that community in. And I had to dig deeply to find that in some of the, you know, canon, you know, and I had very slim pickings. Like, yes, Mark Bradford, Ellen Gallagher, everybody's doing something, you know, but it does depend on some of these collections. Like, are they buying Kelly, you know, are they buying Kerry James Marshall?
Yeah.
Are they buying Fred Wilson? Are they buying these pieces that then a person like me can do something with or not? So
well, it's also how are they bringing, how is the work of those artists being made accessible or available, right? The imagery. And also it talks about how the artists themselves want their images to be accessible too, right?
Well,
You
and
know,
this is one of the things I thought about as well, Zoe, that the Studio Museum in Harlem was started by artists.
yeah,
You know, the Underground Museum started by an
started
artist.
by artists.
Many of the galleries that were showing Black artists' work in the last century, they were also started by artists. They took the initiative themselves. What do you think about that, Antoine?
I think it's necessary. I mean, I think that in general, art is something that's not going to be super disconnected from your real life experience. So I think that after a while, because I'm in this place right now, people are looking at me like, are you going to start your own space? Because I constantly go wondering, why wasn't I served? Why wasn't I sent? Like, and not even the individual I mean, just like my community. And every time I step up to see it, there are white curators ready to tell me I'm not real. It's like the imposter syndrome is so a thing, you know. And even in my own community, we talked briefly in other times, like I beg for like leadership or like mentorship or like some type of, that's why I always say lighting the path, because you really don't know where you're going. You're feeling it out, and until you feel something good, you're just bumping your head up against everything, you know. Like I mean, I can't even tell you. It's wonderful to hear my bio be read out, because sometimes I'm like, I forget what I've survived. You know, like I'm just really out here.
What you've accomplished and what you've accomplished, not just the survival, but also what you've thrived and excelled at, right?
Thank you. Yeah, for sure. But I do think listening to artists and understanding, you know, I think about the Astor Gates, I think about Lauren Halsey's Summer Everything Center, I think about Noah Davis, I think about all of these places. And then this is just, again, the experiences that I've had. They're all saying that there wasn't enough. I also think about Linda Goodbryant, you know, because I feel like that whole drive to say, like, where can we go? Where, you know, I've cried over this a lot of times, you know, just to be super transparent, like there is not enough space. Where do we go? And so when people say, do you make your own? It feels like a big challenge, but it is important, because you know in the deep of your hearts that this isn't enough, you know. and we're too expressive of a people to keep giving us one at a time, one person in the canon at a time. That's like not enough, you know.
Do we still
Yeah.
need to have those separate spaces like an African American museum? Both of you, I'd like to know, do you feel that we've made it, that we're in the mainstream now? And actually, to me, it looks like artists of the Black African diaspora are leading the art world right now. So do we need to still have our own separate spaces that's focused just on our work?
Well, I think that we need both. I think there's value in both. You know, yeah, I am an advocate for self-separative spaces, especially when it's about safety, right? And it's about sort of unpacking the agendas that are our own. I
And how
totally
the work
believe
is
that.
interpreted or even shown,
Exactly.
right?
I think that that's really important. I think that context is everything. I think about someone like, Wanda D. Ewing is somebody that I was inspired by and still am inspired by. And she was based in Omaha, Nebraska. And when she passed away, and I think in 2013, due to complications from chemo, her friends, her community started the Union for Contemporary Art really in her honor,
Mhm.
right? And I think for someone like her, who was a trailblazer in the Midwest, here's a Black female artist working in Omaha, Nebraska at the university, teaching there as a professor. And she is, she's like the unicorn. She was a Black unicorn. And so yes, we do need our own spaces, and we need to be in other spaces, that we clearly have built,
Mhm.
spaces that have clearly benefited from our bodies and our thinking and our culture creation, etc. And so Wanda Ewing is just amazing. And I think that someone like Sheena Rose is somebody else, that she is from Barbados. She's an artist that has created her own company surrounding her own work, and she's making her own space. At the same time, she's participating in, the canons, if you will, right? The mainstream, if you will. And so she knows the value of her being able to step in both worlds. And I think that that's a really beautiful thing. I want to see more of that. And so, yes, to both of those. I think someone like Rashawn Rucker is working with Namdi Contemporary in Miami. He's
Mhm.
another person. It's like, do we have our own space? Do we work in this in within mainstream, right? What is that? I mean, as I say mainstream, I wonder, like, what the heck does that actually mean? Because I think that we are the mainstream. And so, I think that these are really interesting questions that that talk about the ways that we participate. But all of these artists that we're discussing have gone in and out, above, around, and through all sorts of spaces and places, and they've navigated it, I have to say, quite frankly, on their own terms, in ways that work really well for them. And I
Well,
think that's
I
amazing.
I wanted to kind of get some of the questions that we're running close to our time, and I'd like to answer or just put out some of the questions from some of our viewers. Is there a growth need for Black artist designers to have a strong hand in the heritage expressed through art communities? That's from Rochelle Reed. Why don't we let AJ answer? What do you think about that, AJ?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that question, just because
Yes.
I was
Is
kind of
there a
pondering over some
growth
of.
or need for Black artists and designers to have a strong hand in the heritage expressed through arts communities?
And maybe the way I'm interpreting that is like, does the art that we produce need to be connected to the like the culture
Through
that
the
we come
Black
from?
art community, yes, through shown
Um,
by us, or
yeah, and I guess in some ways this is kind of twining into what I was like really in the thinking about, because I feel like as a young man, I have to always note that my emotions can lead me forward in my thoughts on this, because I feel oftentimes with this question of like space, whether it be like a Black art space or a white art space. Thank you for these pictures because they might support what I'm saying a little bit better. I'm always confronted, and I don't really know how to answer that specifically, because it's an I statement. Like for me, I feel these things, but then I'm also like in a strong feeling of double consciousness, because I'm like, we have to go into these spaces, but then when we're there, like, how are we armed, you know? And so a lot of these examples that you're seeing are places that are owned by white voices, I suppose. And these are moments where I'm gathering bodies of color, young people, community people that I know. Sometimes there are people that just follow me on social media. You know, I was doing this thing, the Bro, for a long time, where I would invite friends to come out. Like, this is a great example, if I could hold this one. You know, one friend comes, you get the tour with me. That's a great way to do it. Bring four back. Those people come, they get it, bring four back and four back and four back, until this idea became a thing of like, AJ's building community within these spaces. But oftentimes, like, this was I mean, I could hear them on the mic surveilling us. I could hear them thinking about what it is that I'm saying. We're laughing, we're enjoying, we're not touching the work. Maybe more slides I think we can move to, just the
yes.
Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, and this is it. This is the
it's about community, right?
DEAI. This is it in a picture. And I've had white curators look me in the face before and say, we don't need another picture of young Black people in front of Black art, as if we're doing it for the photo op. But really, in any of these engaging moments, you can see that these are kernels of change and hope. So I do hold on to the idea of like safe space. I do think that we need that. I do think that artists, I don't say that your job is to point to that, but I would love for more artists to have a claim. That's me and Kelly, because I love Kelly, she's everything. Really kind of like bring that in, because again, as an art historian or curator, it's not my job to insert that into your work. My job is to bring out what you're bringing out. This one, just for the sake of like homage, this is the Underground Museum. This is my matriarch. This is my support system. You know, Nipsey Hussle came to the Broad when I was at the Broad, and my head was very low that day. I had been told to go stand in the corner and stop talking to guests and stop sharing these conversations. And he told me to keep going. A year later, you know, we lost him in the community. The Underground Museum is situated right in the neighborhood that he kind of came from and where he put most work in. And Melina in the brown coat, director of Queen and Slim, talked to Lauren and said, I have this kid who your husband took a tour with, and he's up next, and we need to go visit him. And we had a Nipsey Hussle altar in the backyard of the Underground Museum that the community had built, Patrice Colors, Black Lives Matter. And every day I cleaned that altar off. Every day I made sure those candles were lit. Every day the fruit was set. You know, there was no separation of culture and space and art space. And this family, you know, look up Noah Davis, look up Karan Davis. So she's a matriarch that kept that family going. So again, I just say that, like, and that's just paintings in the background. These moments, you know, yes, we do need our own spaces. Maybe I'll just have to say that, because as a young man, I just feel I don't want to lie to myself, you know.
Yeah.
So we have another question from our viewers. This is from Rashida Witter. I'm curious about whether site specificity is a consideration of Zoe's practice. She spoke about how her suburban upbringing inspired the foliage present in her work, but what about the urban landscape of Baltimore, a predominantly Black city with a rich legacy of art and history? Has that influenced her practice at all?
Yeah, it definitely has. I've been here for 18 years, and it would be very problematic if I couldn't acknowledge that many of the shifts that I've made in my own practice have not been the result of actually living here in this environment, right, in this city. And so my political self has became awakened and realized living in Baltimore, right? And so, when you're asking about site specificity, which is usually relegated to, where one places one's work. I think about site specificity as a way where, as a place where someone shifts their politic or deepens their politics. So yeah, it has completely influenced my thinking and the way that I navigate through these spaces. It is the first time I've ever lived in an urban, or what one might call an urban place. So it's very exciting and I won't leave. I love living here.
That's really great. Antoine, Cheryl Lynn Perkins wants to know, how best may a novice, and she puts that in quote, artist without formal training gain recognition? Is formal training the best route?
This is a conversation I love having, and I was thinking about this too in a different form about like degrees, non-degrees. I mean, I'm triggered again because I love the idea of outsider art and outsider conversation. I found that's where the realest things are being produced because they're so connected to culture and so connected to people. So I do think sometimes like the what we feel like is the canon or the academia will certainly start to peel those things back a little bit, and then maybe you want to make work that reflects the things that allow you in. So I think as a novice, stay true to what is you. I mean, literally, like as you can see in my attire today, I try to make sure I feel and look and am accessibly the me that I was when I was hoping for it. Anything about that journey is just accoutrement, because I really want to make sure I'm staying like there, because I think that's where the reality of like change and shifting will happen. Yeah.
Yeah, there's so many artists that have been lost because of that. Tell me what your ideas are and what do you feel about the artist residencies, which is to me an exciting development that are being developed by artists themselves, like Next Haven that Titus is doing, or like the one that Kahinde has started in Senegal. What do you think about that movement, and do you think this is good for the art world, or how do you feel about those?
Personally, I love that just because I think that, yeah, like these paths are so dark for all of us. No one, again, imposter syndrome. I have talked to very successful people, leaders of whatever, and still don't feel that they've done enough. And these are people that I'm like, I adore. If it wasn't for you, I wouldn't even be hanging on to this. So I think that these residencies are great places of affirmation. And I think that we all need affirmation and community and legacy, and to know that even as an artist, what you're inserting into this isn't the first time it's been said. We have been trying that. I think about that a lot as a curator, as a writer, as a thinker, that like my work is to know what was said before me, because if I say something, I can say something, but I have to own up to the fact that this is not the new struggle. There is there's nothing. I'm like Mountain Frustration, freestyle, the Underground Museum, all of these Black radical women, all of these conversations have happened before me. So all I'm merely doing is saying that if we're still asking for that, why? So like you're reshaping it.
Are you both inspired by the time that we're in now, that so many artists of the Black African diaspora are getting their due, are having careers during their lifetime or as they emerge even?
Yes.
Do you feel that this is a positive outcome for us, or is struggle good for artists? Is it wonderful that the establishment and the institutions are recognizing us?
Most definitely. It's I think everybody would say, depending on when they were born, they're like, this is the best time to be alive. I think that I live in a really amazing time.
My only concern though is the work have to signal that it is Black work? Is it, when you're an abstract artist, does how do you have to still make that connection to Africa? What do you guys think? What do the two of you think about that?
Can I just do this? So the first question, yes, I am very happy that there are folks getting their due while they're living. Simone Lee is an example of that, hands down. period. I
Love
am
her.
so happy that she is not 90 years old and having and experiencing this. Thank you, God. Right? That's fantastic. And I just also just want to acknowledge, like, there are other spaces like Ashar has got, a residency program that's opening up soon, and it's amazing. So Derek Adams has a residency program that he's opening up in Baltimore. This is really important. There's a residency, Hayama residency in Japan, is another one that's started by, Black folk, and so this is really important too. Um, but the other part of your question, which was, because I really wanted to answer that one, I didn't want to forget this one. What was the second part of your question?
I was saying, is there a need to telegraph that you're a Black artist in the world?
So this is so interesting, and I have to use someone like and someone like Lewis Kamnitzer, Lewis Cameron, and also someone like Leslie Smith III. They're making abstract paintings. Are there markers within certain bodies of their work that point to their Black identity? No, it's not. But the mere fact that they are doing it is the point, right? Because there was a time when, artists who are Black were engaging in levels of abstraction, and did it out of necessity, because that was the only way that they could move through the art world. They could get any acknowledgement, right? Or someone like Tanner, who is making paintings of pastoral scenes, and you would see these little figures in the background, and they were all white figures, and he would have to embark on those kinds of images.
I love like Odili Donald Odida,
Exactly.
whose work
So,
is grounded in Africa, but it doesn't look like it is.
well, and I think it's for me, it's less about what it looks like. Like there's a kind of aesthetic. I mean, I'm thinking that you're getting to, is there a kind of an aesthetic that signals Blackness or Africanness? And yes, there is, but at the same time, there are other ways that artists identify themselves who are Black, who are Black American, who are African, who are Caribbean, that have to do with other kinds of aesthetic conditions that that don't always come through in the work. And I would say that no, it doesn't have to. We're the only communities of people that are required or expected to put this as a stamp, a rubber stamp on the work. And I just say that because of who we are, the fact that our hands made that, that's enough. That's
And
enough.
Antoine, do you I noticed in the images of the shows you've done and what you're involved with, that there is abstraction, there are other subjects matter other than, the Black experience. Talk to me about what you're looking for when you're looking at artists, and is that important that it telegraphs that it is a Black artist?
Yeah, totally. And I think that the big part of this is being someone who is connected to legacy. So like, I try to be, I'm not quiet because I don't have opinion. I'm quiet because it's extremely important to listen to the people in my community talk about ourselves, because again, my job is to reflect that when I go into museum spaces or gallery spaces. Like, this is what we're thinking about ourselves. Does this work respond to it? Does it not? Let's have the conversation. So I think for me, furthering that, there are a lot of artists that are in my contemporary group that don't feel that as she said, the struggles, that the need of it is as relevant for them. Because I won't even include myself, because again, like AJ Antoine, I have a very particular politics that comes from Black community that I've seen in Howard. So what I understand of diasporic things is like, everything that I think Zoe is pointing to, that by mere nature of us being, that's it. So I do challenge what Black artists, what this motif or expression or aesthetic is supposed to look like, because I think there's a limited understanding of what people, we've been so colonized and so rated, and our image has been so handed out to us that people think that this is what the Black image is. And in reality, there are things that we've always had secret society. Look to Belkid, look to all these artists that are saying Why can't we have something for us that's just for us, and that's okay? So I don't think that there needs to be. I do love a Frank Bowling with the symbol of an Africa in the work, but again, like I'm also thrilled by some of the artists that I'm working with right now that their hands are brown. This is Black art. It does not have to do with. But I'm not one. But I do challenge those. I do challenge those artists to say that while your expression can be free, you are tied to something. You are tied to a legacy. You are committed to something. So whether it shows up in the painting or shows up in your heart or shows up in the music that you're listening to while you're producing, you're here. You know what I mean? So yeah, again, I the individual have a politic, but
well, I'm being asked to wrap this up.
Okay.
I cannot tell you how exciting and wonderful this conversation has been. We've been getting really wonderful feedback from our audience. People are really enjoying the conversation as well. I certainly have. We could do this for another 2 or 3 hours as far as I'm concerned. And maybe we will get together after the pandemic and have a dinner party and talk all night. Thank you so much to both of you, brilliant young people. I very much appreciate your time and your thoughts and your creativity and your contribution to the culture.
Thank you so much, Cheryl. Thanks, AJ. It's great to meet you.
Of course. That was fun.
That was awesome. Thanks, Cheryl.
We'll do it again.
Yeah.
On our own.